Our dad, Jay Secchio, Chief Counsel at ACLJ, is joining us now. And Dad, first, I just wanted to get your reaction to the verdict yesterday by the jurors in this case in New York.
Well, I think it's fair to say that everybody knew that getting a fair trial in Manhattan was a very difficult task for the lawyers because the jury it was so clearly going to be on the side of the prosecutors because it was an anti-Trump county, which is New York County, which is Manhattan, of course. And then secondly, let's be realistic. I mean, I would have never put two lawyers on that jury, to be honest. I think that was a mistake. So that being aside, I do think that this case, which has got a long way to go, and I say a long way to go because the appellate process in New York is not quick. There's and we'll get into that. There's a multi-level appellate process that before it would go to the U.S. Supreme Court. But I think that, was obviously going to be the next recourse. But the reality is that it was an uphill battle to begin with. But I thought that, a hung jury was the more likely scenario, although as you and I talked yesterday, Jordan, when they announced at around 4 o'clock that the jury had reached a verdict, I said it's going to be guilty on all 34 counts because there's no way they could have come up with a hung jury that quickly. You got to at least stay out. I think in New York it's 12 hours before you could declare it a mistrial, and this was about 10. So you knew at that point it was 34 either convictions or acquittal, and I couldn't imagine a scenario where it would have been in that jury a 34 acquittal.
Yeah.
So
you talked about the process. The sentencing is 4 days before the convention, and that's also starts the clock for when you have to file the notice of appeal. I would think they probably filed, Dad, the notice of appeal earlier because you'd want the stay. You'd want to file for a stay on the sentencing as well.
Yeah, and so in New York, the way it works, I've done a lot of cases in New York. I'm out of law school, left the government, and was with a firm out of Manhattan for a number of years. And the way it works is this. They're going to file their notice of appeal, which should also include a stay. The appeal will go to what's called, it's different in New York because the trial court where this took place is actually called the Supreme Court, but it's not the Supreme Court as we would traditionally understand it. So they have what's called the Appellate Division, which is the mid-level court of appeals. That review is mandatory, so that is an automatic appeal. That should stay, with a motion to stay, both the sentence and allow for the appeal to go on. There's a number of issues here to appeal this on. If it's not successful there, they could apply for review to the New York Court of Appeals, which is their highest court. They could either accept it or reject the appeal. They don't have to take it. If they take it and rule against the president, they could then go to the Supreme Court of the United States. If they take it and rule for the president, the other side could go. So, again, this has got a long way to go. It's also a first offender treatment, and so there should be no way they could impose a sentence of incarceration. But we all knew there was not going to be a fair trial here, and this trial was flawed from the beginning.
I think a lot of them are worried about the sentencing and all of that because we've seen so many rules and changes happening. I'm actually seeing the chat right now. One person just asked, do they have to wait for sentencing to begin the appeal process, or is that something that can be happening at the same time? As we know, they've announced that sentencing will occur just a couple days before the convention, the Republican National Convention. Seems, again, like a lot of interesting timing. But, of course, people are concerned with that when they see a lot of changes being made in just these cases as this one has been proceeded.
Well, look, I mean, technically, the notice of appeal could be filed. You could file an emergency stay of the whole proceedings. I don't think that will be successful. So, at a minimum, the appeal would be filed, Logan, really at the time of sentence being executed, because that's when everything goes into effect. But everything will be ready, I'm sure, before. Now, if I was the president on this particular one, I'd get a different team to handle this appeal. No question about it. I was talking to some of the colleagues that we worked with, Jordan, that you and I worked with when we were representing the president in the impeachment or in the Mueller probe, and it's a very different type of skill set, obviously, than this. But you need appellate lawyers that could really handle this appeal. Then the second part of this will be the sentence, Logan, as you're talking about. Not likely that they would impose incarceration here. Again, first offender treatment, a white-collar crime, book entry crime. I mean, a misdemeanor at best. They came up with this, crazy theory to make it a felony, which was including a jury instruction that the jury did not have to be unanimous as to the underlying crime, which is absurd. The Supreme Court has said that's not right. So there's a lot of grounds for appeal. Whether they'll be successful in New York or not, I don't know. His bond was reduced by 2/3 by the New York Court of Appeals in the civil case brought by the Attorney General. So that was a pretty big win for the president in that case. So I think there's a way to go on that could be successful on appeal, and I think they have to just take it all the way through. And then, of course, within the next month, we're going to know about the January 6th Jack Smith case, because the immunity claim, which is before the Supreme Court of the United States, will be decided by the end of June.
Yeah, so you've got that, and then you move to like the federal side of those kind of cases, and the decision by the Supreme Court. Where people are, you also wonder, where's Donald Trump ends up next. It doesn't look like it's Florida. That case is slow. Georgia's now on appeal, so it would be if Jack Smith got a friendly verdict out of the U.S. Supreme Court and move forward there out of Washington D.C. sometime probably post the Republican convention, it would look like. But also, I think just when we read kind of how this is being explained to the American people, I think what's important here, Dad, is we always say, and as a legal group, the courts are still your place of last resort. The one way I think we could put a stamp on this and stop the U.S. from going in this direction of a weaponized legal system against political opponents, maybe starting with a president who has been under this attack since he took the oath of office and became president, when we were fighting back against whether it was these congressional committees, and then impeachment 1, impeachment 2, Mueller investigation, and then the post-presidential criminal attacks going after with special counsels and local DAs and state AGs. That truthfully, if the American people vote for Donald Trump November 5th, that may send a message to the left that you might be successful in some of these prosecutions, but that's not going to stop people. The American people will see right through it, and maybe you would pray that this puts an end to this in the United States of America, that we don't become like these countries many of us have worked in, where after you're out of political office, even if you were very successful, you become a criminal.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the political ramifications of this will be known at the ballot box. That will be the final adjudication.
Yeah, November 5th. Dad, we appreciate you joining us on this issue. We're going to be bringing you back when we through this process, because, again, even the words used, like the appellate division and then the appeals court, is different. It's different in New York. And then there's going to be issues too, constitutional issues that arise, state issues that arise. We're going to get through all of that as this happens.